Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast presented by Strategic Treasurer, your source for interesting Treasury news, analysis, and insights in your car, at the gym, or wherever you decide to tune in. How do treasurers effectively drive change across an organization? On this episode of the podcast, Jeffery talks with Todd Picken, Corporate Vice President and Treasurer at MassMutual, to discuss the joys and opportunities of Treasury transformation and how both need to be tempered with a dose of reality. Topics of discussion center around achieving success through paying for transformation, moving the culture forward, and getting technology to work. Listen in to find out more.
Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast. This is Jeffery, and I'm here with Todd Picken, who's the treasurer of MassMutual. Treasury transformation contains both joys and opportunities that need to be tempered with a dose of reality. That's the focus of today's podcast. Let me introduce Todd Picken. Todd is the treasurer of MassMutual. MassMutual is a large insurance company based in Massachusetts. That organization has been around since 1851. And Todd is no stranger to driving change across several different leading treasury and insurance organizations. And importantly, you'll find that he's quite active in giving back to the industry, sharing his insights and experiences, most notably with Loma and now on the Treasury Update podcast. So Todd, welcome to the Treasury Update podcast.
Thanks, Craig. Appreciate you listening to me today on this topic.
So as we jump into the topic about Treasury transformation, that's a bit of a buzzword. I want to move past what the buzzword is into the reality. That's why we call it the dose of reality, what's going on. So let's talk about change and transformation. So any organization is facing a lot of change, rapid change. And as Treasury professionals, as IT professionals, everyone has to do more to adapt. Transformation seems to me to be the rapid adoption of change in an intentional manner, thinking through, making changes to processes, workflows, technology in a systematic manner intentionally. So from a change perspective, I'd like to hear some of your thinking on what's changing and the level of that change. How dramatic is that change that you're seeing?
Well, Craig, one of the important things to understand is that Treasury has become more strategic to any organization, regardless if you're a large mutual insurer like MassMutual. But what I think is most obvious to me is we are helping to change a fast-paced environment. Technology is changing, the way in which commerce works today, the way in which we use technology to move money requires the Treasury area to not only be out in front of some of that technology, but to be able to communicate effectively across the organization. Be able to suggest different technologies so that our customer experience is better. But more importantly, the more you do with the rest of your organization to understand those needs, the better information you have as a Treasury department to manage overall liquidity for the company and some of the operational needs going forward. Aside from that, more pivotal, obviously, than ever in helping to manage overall balance sheet of the company and capital of the company. In order to do that, you really have to figure out how to get more efficient in your organization so that you're focused on real, analytical work versus a lot of the operational work. So I covered a couple things there, but the bottom line is the change that we see most dramatically is to really focus from real operational work to more analytical work across the company.
Okay, so that's the top, the movement from operational movements to more analysis, better insight, running different models. But you also started off with, you talked about technology, adapting or adopting different types of technology to drive the business forward and communicating. Those two things seem pretty important.
Sure. It's very important that, especially, many of our companies have been around for many years, in our case 168. And so over time, many of us have had multiple systems that we interface with. The Treasury Department in large companies with multiple administrative platforms have to easily coordinate the data and make sure we have that data consolidated in an efficient way. So I do find that leading the organization through some of that transformation and being able to better consolidate that data and convert systems and helping that payments, both receipt and disbursements of the company become more automated, also provide better insight to cash flows is pivotal in the future and currently in the Treasury environment.
So the value play for this transformation, is it about moving to an analytical organization, leveraging the data and the technology, or is it more about process redesign, or how would you put that together? I mean, it's got to be some of all of it.
Of course, it's all of it, but we tend to think about our customer experience first. There's only a few times life insurance company has a experience with a customer, and most of the time it's through premium payment, and then other times we have opportunities to really help people when an unfortunate event occurs. And so what we try and focus on is how that experience feels to the average customer, and frankly, the payments that happen on a regular basis by any of our policyholders is in itself an experience. So as we focus on new technologies and the ability to integrate those into our products, Treasury's there helping to navigate that environment and understand that the latest and greatest ways in which our customers will pay us and we'll pay them.
Now, you mentioned two areas that your mindset is on. One is on the customer. What's their customer experience? Few times to interact as an insurance company. How do you make that less painful or more enjoyable? And then you also talked about the capital, the balance sheet planning, making sure you're looking after the organization's balance sheet. How do you think about those two things together in terms of transformation? Are they separate tracks? Is it just one, or how do you look at it?
Well, I think it really depends on your company and the role you play as a treasurer for any company. A large mutual company like MassMutual, it's about longevity. Our liabilities will reach out 60 years. And so when we think about being there for our customers, policyholders, we have to make sure we have the surplus and capital there and maintain the financial strength to be there when our customers need us the most. So when I discuss, there's really two separate opportunities. One is making sure the experience of our customers, we're there when they need us. That reputation matters. So it's making sure we have the financial strength, and that's one aspect. But the other aspect is making sure their experience in being a new customer and throughout the years that we're keeping up to date with the technologies that keep them talking about us as a company that is proactive in that space and innovative.
Todd, when we started the podcast, I mentioned that Treasury transformation is the rapid adoption of change intentionally, being intentional about adopting change, whether it's process or systems. Do you agree with that, or how would you calibrate that differently?
I would say that what we are doing is part of what Treasury sees as part of the organization is really all the cash flows of the company, and where there's opportunity for an experience in one part of our company that should be replicated across another part, we really want to see that being consistent so our customers have the same experience, whether they're a customer of our workplace environment or a customer of our insurance business. I do take an approach, or MassMutual takes the approach of trying to coordinate a lot of this change across both areas consistently, and we do have a team of what we call Treasury consultants that spend a lot of time talking about models and architecture that support this type of environment.
So you have a built-in transformation team in your group, it sounds like.
I wouldn't call them a built-in transformation team. I'd call them the consulting team that is advising on how most efficiently to set up our cash management processes, and while doing so, adopting the best practices. Regardless of, this isn't a project of transformation and it's over, it's constantly looking at ways in which to refine the business and deliver new technology, new ways in which we can move the cash flows in the company.
Am I putting words in your mouth if I would say the MassMutual definition of transformation is continual change, continually making things better, not just event-driven?
Correct. Getting better at getting better, Craig, is probably what I would say.
All right. That sounds good. Sounds like it could be on a button maybe. So I want to talk about three areas in sequence. One is getting buy-in. How do you pay for transformation? So there's an element there of how do you fund this ongoing getting better at getting better, or even a larger project if that happens to be the case. Second, I want to talk about the cultural change because there's a pretty big human element. And we've seen in many cases where some people can adapt to the change and others have a harder time. So how do you go about making the best change culturally to that. And then finally, I want to discuss technology, getting technology to work. Every transformation project, or almost every single transformation project or mindset, constantly layers in new technology as we go through that. So those are the three areas. But starting off on, paying for transformation or getting buy-in, how have you, I'll say you, but how has MassMutual Treasury had success in paying for these changes that you're talking about, the getting better at getting better?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't just lock it into Treasury alone. We think in terms of our entire corporate finance division focused on transformation, because as a trusted partner with the rest of our businesses, our entire corporate finance team work together to help that transformation process happen. The way we've thought about it at MassMutual, and I'm pretty certain other companies are also looking at it this way, is what type of work are we doing in our controllership, in our treasury group, in the rest of the organization that is very repeatable work, is work that has always been very operational in nature, where we could potentially leverage TPAs or outsourcing to get an arbitrage that works to our benefit. Hopefully that process can then help fund some of the technology that helps us be more analytical. We definitely are focused on taking a look at some of that work and looking to do as much of that as possible. And culturally, that's a big change. So, you asked, how you pay for it. Well, you do as much of that as you can. You try and get more efficient, you improve process. We're a fairly significant lean shop, so we do process improvement and solve around, using lean techniques on a regular basis. We look at opportunities for robotic processing where there's opportunities, and then we look at strategic partners to help us, really handle some of the repeatable work that is out there for us and more operational based work. And as a result of those three things, we will end up with the ability to help pay for, I'll call new technologies that are based in investing in data and being able to synthesize that data in a way to look around the corner, to be able to do a better job at sales forecasting, to do a better job at evaluation and modeling in the organization. And yes, in being able to do a better job at cash forecasting and some of the treasury work that we do. So that's the way we're looking at it. We're not just going out there looking for funding. We're looking for ways in which we can become more efficient to be able to pay for some of this change.
Todd, let me jump in there for a second. I want to do some follow-up on the buy-in aspect. I liked your comment about, it's not just Treasury. You're looking at all of finance. You're part of a bigger organization. There's partnering. And then when you talked about the, paying for any change that you're doing, you gave the example of TPAs or third-party administrators where maybe you're arbitraging staffing costs. You're moving very repeatable events to locations or service companies or partners who can do those things more affordably. Does that also include that arbitrage where you're shifting to a lower cost method? Does it also include robotic process automation or automation where you can eliminate some of the human element for something that's very repeatable, moving data around, doing initial evaluation, and then the humans involved, then your professionals are involved in doing analysis or monitoring or managing the process. Do you look at both of those, or is it just the arbitrage of labor?
Correct. As I mentioned, we look at process improvement, but we also look at ways in which we can put robotic process around certain activities. And we find that the robotic processing that we have accomplished is more than, a lot of people look at it and say, well, I used to do that with macros and other scripting. But the robotics processing we see today is much more advanced. First of all, it solves problems in a similar way that we used to with macros, but the maintenance of those robots or bots and the way they're managed is more effective. And there's not going to be a scenario. We hope there's not going to be a scenario where down the road, if something changes, it's too difficult to modify the bot that's running the process. So there are cases in Treasury where we've been able to look at robotic processing in our investment ops side of the house that's proved very effective. So we continue to look at those opportunities, try and measure cost-benefit analysis of each one. There are a few people in our organization that were brought in specifically to do robotic processing, and their time is extremely valuable. So we sort try and align those projects based on the CBAs we can put together.
There's probably no end to items that can be automated in this quest for being more efficient. I like how you self-fund those by finding opportunities to improve your efficiency and then pour that back into, in this case, a few people are working on robotics, RPA activity, et cetera. Do you run into challenges where you're competing for funds like in almost every organization? Do you have to make arguments about this, we need to do this from a financial perspective, a strategic perspective to address the need, to control the risk? How else are you making those arguments, or is it really just about swapping better services, more analytics, and saving money in the course of action?
Well, I don't think there's any organization out there that doesn't manage their funding of these type of initiatives closely. There's typically limited resource and limited funds available. But that's the importance of demand management and making sure you have the proper CBAs in place, and you're identifying not only efficiency metrics, but you're also identifying opportunities for improvements in both investment earnings or better projections for the business teams and the sales force, et cetera.
Do any of these arguments involve this will help us with control, reducing risk, in addition to the performance metrics?
Sure. Actually, there's always a review we do around anything, whether it's additional monitoring controls when you're sourcing activities and functions through the robotics process where you have to have additional monitoring controls. So don't think that you can just turn some bot on and step away. There's a good percentage of time. Plan on spending at least 20% of your time monitoring the outcomes of the bots and making sure that all the controls are in place there. As you can imagine, we're very control focused in a finance area, so those are very important. What's really interesting is when you're doing things that help you manage risk on a regular basis using bots, they're 24/7. You're always going to have the most up-to-date counterparty risk data or other information you might need.
Yeah, so as we move on from paying for the transformation or making sure there's buy-in for it to the human element, the concept of cultural change, this idea that change is easier to push on others than to have pushed onto you, for example. Just it's easier to talk about change rather than to live through it. But I think the important part is the human side of transforming is pretty disruptive to some people. It's very energizing to others, and sometimes there's new activities, new requirements, and certain functions and activities no longer exist, and other ones come in their place, and maybe a lot more other ones come in their place. But we've seen, sometimes 20, 30, or even 40% of people not being able to adapt to major changes in their area when automation keeps coming or people make significant changes. If it happens rapidly, some people don't retool as quickly, and so in terms of helping this, what do you see as important in helping the culture change, I guess, on a continual basis, and helping individuals change, whether it's finding something else to do if they're not able to change in the way that's needed, but how do you help bring people along with this?
Well, I think it starts with making sure you're communicating effectively the change that's about to occur, and making sure you have strong opportunities to discuss the development that's necessary to get to be in that new environment with the folks that are in your group. And you're absolutely right. Some people will really be anxious to get there, and others won't be. However, what I've found is that the more you communicate and the more you discuss the changes and identify the opportunities for development, the more engaged your staff is to learn those tools. So am I saying 100% of the group is going to move forward with that? No, I'm not going to say that. But for the most part, if you invest in the talent and you start looking at the development opportunities and measure that, some of this is a lot more exciting than the work that's being done before. So don't give up on that cultural side, because we've experienced a fairly significant change in the past year, and our associate level is working hand in hand with the leadership team here in Treasury to come up with the new training plans and the new development opportunities within the department. And everyone is excited about learning, genuinely. So not everybody will want to be there. I get it, but as a leader, you need to really put that lighthouse goal out there and make sure that the people understand what the outcome is. If they believe in the outcome, then they'll want to move ahead.
I think that says it really well. We see people that look at it as an opportunity, look at the change as an opportunity. They're constant learners. They want to help drive the change. They do the best at that. I can't try to remember that movie that there was these ladies from NASA. They were the calculators, and they manually calculated everything, and then they were learning how to use the computer because they saw that was going to be faster, and we're looking ahead. What's the next step? How can we leverage the tools of the day?
Right. Exactly.
But Todd, technology changes a lot of things, and if you're not adapting to change, there might be some ways to handle it. But if you keep moving to areas that are like, I'm going to do something that's all manual, I think you'll find that technology just chases those people around the organization as you keep finding ways to become more efficient, especially for the real mundane tasks. But when we talk about technology, we shift onto technology, getting technology to work. I think I mentioned earlier that every major transformation includes some significant technology elements or technologies involved in them. Where and how do you see tech impacting Treasury? You've already talked about a few areas, but just talk about those things that make the most difference.
Well, I think in Treasury specifically, the newer platforms that are out there that really integrate all the different flows of the company and allow you to see a one picture. We've come a long way in that space in Treasury, in the systems that are out there. And many of them are actually cloud-based now, which is nice too. But I would say the most important thing to think about is how your interfaces with the platforms that give you the information for liquidity each day. Can you set that up so that in a decade to 2 decades, there won't be major change necessary in the future? So how do you make that as dynamic as possible? How do you make that so it's not becoming just another siloed platform or siloed process down the road and can be replaced with new technology easily? So I think strategically we have to think about that. One of the challenges most companies have had over the years is the payments and the payment systems tended to all be attached directly to the administrative platforms, and we just may have to think differently about that because we ended up with MassMutual with a lot of payment systems, and I'm sure many other companies have the same challenges. So getting to a point where you have a more centralized hub-type approach to managing a lot of the cash flows is, I think, one of those areas that it's important to focus on.
I like that. I think of it as, older systems used to be maybe 2-tier. There was the UI and the database and process layer were sometime commingled, and they moved to a 3-tier or an N-tier where the data layer, the process layer, and the UI. And now we move more, as you said, like to open systems where you can have specialty systems that connect one to another. I hear you talking really about what does the modern Treasury technology stack or the new finance stack need to look like so that it does last, years and more than a decade, so that you can continue to move towards what your future state needs to be. Now, as we look at reporting and analysis, there's a few things on that, right? So if someone says to you, Todd, we need this information or that information, you go to your team, they say, where's the data? How do I get the data into, some normal state that I can run and analyze? But what do you think about data when you say, how do we set up an organization, that can help us answer questions that we might not know how to ask today? How do we create that type of flexibility so that we can be an analytical organization, knowing that there will be questions that we can't ask yet, but we're going to have to answer later? How can we be more nimble in the future as we think about data?
If you are leading a group of people through transformation, and you talk to them about, listen, we're going to shift everything from being transactional based and repeatable work. We're going to get strategic partners to do that, and now I need you to be more analytical. And you leave the conversation there. Everyone's going to interpret analytical work differently. And in some cases, I looked at this, solved this problem, therefore I'm analytical. What you have to do is actually put some very simple goals out and drive towards that analytical change. An example I like to use is when the Treasury team, when I talk to them about the analytical work, how do we maximize liquidity? How do we maximize the cash available for investment each day? And how do we maximize the return on our portfolio as a result? So go back to every particular job. If you are working in Treasury, you're in a job most likely that can impact that result. Start analyzing ways in which you can help to drive those earnings, to help drive the process. And look for ways in which to get better reporting and better data to help support that. And that gives them something to shoot for there. Otherwise, everything that everyone interprets analytics differently. In many of the FP&A teams, we talk about the FP&A or analysis is usually based on looking at history or results and why we came up with different results. But the real analytical work in their space is to be able to project the results. What's going to happen down the road? What do we need to be targeting? So it's making sure that we're not bogged down with just trying to dig out why something happened, but actually being able to look around the corner. And so that can apply to almost any area in our corporate finance group, at least. I guess the bottom line is, when you're leading through a lot of this change and talking about being more analytical, you have to get something out there that's the bogey, that someone can actually look at and say, okay, I'm going to see how I can impact that.
Yeah, I like that. That simply stated goal. It's easy to state, but it's supremely challenging to hit because it's not reach a certain number. It's how can you maximize the cash available? How can you get the return on the portfolio or whatever your goals happen to be? Reduce errors. Very good way to look at it. One other element, Todd, on the just to recap some of these items. When you look at the challenges about getting technology to work, there's people involved, there's technology, there's process understanding, there's handoffs between areas. Obviously, you have to have teamwork. What do you see as the best way to overcome some of those challenges? What are the biggest ones, and what do you see as ways to overcome those challenges, particularly when it's across multiple areas, not just within a homogenous team that is all Treasury or all an admin area?
I think the collaboration across all of our partners, business partners, and the rest of our division has to evolve from a place we're trusted partners in helping each other on a regular basis. And frankly, that comes down to establishing strong rapport, relationships, frankly, helping people in the rest of the organization be successful and making it, a joint success. There's nothing greater than when I hear about an organization thinking of one of our team members as part of their department and engaging them on a regular basis around decision making. That means you're a trusted partner and you're working towards common goals together, and you're really valued from that perspective. So as a corporate finance group, the most important thing for us is to be able to deliver value to the business so that they can grow the business, and that only happens through the proper levels of collaboration, naturally.
Excellent. I like that. Basically your Treasury's embedded in the different areas, in their minds at least. You're developing that relationship of trust and are able to deliver that value. Todd, I want to thank you for sharing your insights and experiences in Treasury transformation. Some really great points. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem, Craig. Thanks for letting me do this. Appreciate it.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.